Sahara.
You're welcome to Sahara TV from our New York studios, again live, reaching you after about 3 weeks of break. Reason why we've been off is because we're upgrading our studios here, and as we promised, we are back with a big bang. So today, I'm talking to somebody that all of you should know already, but he's just, like he said when he came into the studio, a holy man. So by the time you'll be seeing him, on your screen, you find the lights just revolving around his head. It's Nimo Bassey, architect Nimo Bassey, who is a well-known environmentalist, won several awards, including the Right Livelihood Award, and recently started a foundation known as the Health of Mother Earth Foundation. I have a T-shirt here. You know, this is not the Man U T-shirt, by the way. This is the foundation's T-shirt. So, and we just want to talk to him about a variety of things happening in Nigeria. Most importantly, we want to welcome you to our studios here in New York. Don't tell people what you saw behind the cameras in terms of reconstruction going on. But let's talk about genetically modified food in Africa. It seems like, you know, after HIV/AIDS and its devastation and the campaign against it and all of the things that went, GMOs are the next big deal. It's the next big deal in Africa now. And what's happening?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sawari, and congratulate Sahara Reporters for the great work you've been doing and for having me in your studios today. Africa is really being confronted with a very hard push to open up the entire continent to genetically engineered crops and genetically engineered foods. And the push into Nigeria is really very, very serious because we have officials in Nigeria who are so open to the sector and who would wish to introduce these things without any kind of regulation. The first thing we should note is that Nigeria does not have a biosafety law. And so you don't have the mechanisms for really controlling what goes on. And so it's illegal to open up the country to genetically modified organisms in a large scale. But there's some regulation that could allow you to do some experiments in the field, in the laboratory, and, you know, to ensure that Nigerians are protected. But recently we'll be hearing news from ministers in the government of Nigeria claiming that it's okay to import genetically modified crops and foods into the country. And a few years ago, there was the issue of permit given to the Nigerian Root Crops Institute at Umudike to conduct field trial of genetically engineered cassava. And genetically engineered cassava is engineered, this one particular one was engineered to have enhanced levels of vitamin A. Because the story now is that Africans are not only hungry, but that Africans are malnourished. And all these kind of stories are being presented so as to open the continent to the biotech industry, which is based mostly in the United States. And so the issue of genetically modified cassava was not open to public debate. I saw the application, even if I were a layman in this issue, I wouldn't approve their application. But because there were powerful forces behind it, it was approved. And now we don't know if after the field trial, they've now sent the cassava stems to farmers in the market or to plant. There's no information on it.
But now nobody's monitoring.
No, of course, if they don't tell you when they're going to approve, they won't tell you whether there's any monitoring or why would they even monitor when you have people whose major objective is to flood the country. Once you have these genetically modified organisms released to the environment, it's very difficult to withdraw them. You can't recall them. They're not like inanimate things. These are things that will cross-pollinate.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because for the sake of our viewers, to just break this down. Like, when you say genetically modified organisms, what should they expect their food to be like? What do they expect their cassavas to be like? What is the impact on the environment, you know, in the land, even on the economy of Africa?
Right. I think I should have so a lot of people want to know what does genetic engineering even mean?
Yes.
And in very simple terms, we like to explain it this way. If a man is going to have a child, he gets together with his wife or with a woman. And so that's a natural reproduction. A male goat goes to mates a she-goat,
yes.
and they have a kid.
Yeah.
It's same with every animal reproduces within its own species.
Yes.
But with genetic engineering, you pick a genetic material from across the species boundaries. So you can pick from a fish and put in a plant. Some years ago, there was genetically engineered rice that was engineered to fight dehydration in children. Dehydration in children. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
And they picked a gene from human milk, from breast milk, human breast milk, and inserted it in the rice. And the idea was when children eat that rice, then if they are dehydrated, that will take care of it.
Wow.
I mean, you don't have to fight dehydration by this kind of high-tech method.
Exactly.
Dehydration is fought with simple oral rehydration
It's
therapy,
yeah.
salt and sugar and water, and you give the child, and the child gets okay. And so genetically engineered crops are not engineered to help anybody. They're engineered to help the industry that produces the crops. I'll tell you why the reasons why they are pushed and the arguments made. The argument is sector and those who promote it. The arguments they give is that genetically engineered crops produce more. They have higher yield than natural crops. And it's been shown that this is not true. There are scientists who have done research. The Union of Concerned Scientists in the US, 400 scientists produced a report some years back that showed that this is not true. Recently, there's another report that came out last month. The scientists compared yield of crops in the US that are genetically engineered and in Europe that are not genetically engineered, and they showed that the ones in Europe are doing better, when you match them. So it's not true that genetically engineered crops produce more. Secondly, they tell us that genetically engineered crops utilize less chemicals. So you're going to need less herbicide, less pesticide. But this, again, is being shown not to be true, because the same corporations who produce the seeds also produce the chemicals.
Yeah.
So they need to sell. They have to sell.
Exactly.
So it's pure business. And now the argument is that Africans are malnourished, so you need to genetically engineer nourishment. But nourishment is not produced in the factory. There are natural ways of, if people don't have sufficient vitamin A, it's just simply education, popular education. Get people to know what kind of combination. They eat more fruits, they eat this. Some years ago, there was genetically engineered rice that was to have enhanced levels of vitamin A. And you know what? For you to have sufficient quantity of vitamin A from that rice, you needed to eat 5 kilograms of that rice in a day.
Wow.
Nobody eats rice that way.
Yeah.
And the amount of vitamin A you get by eating 5 kilograms of rice is the same amount you can get by eating 2 carrots.
Wow.
And so you have to think about that.
That's serious. Let's look at it from the point of view of who are the people behind this? Who are the faces, that are behind pushing for GMOs in Africa? I mean, Africans would like to know them. We'd like to know the companies. We'd like to know the characters and the personalities that are pushing for, flooding of Africa with GMOs. Okay.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, there are only few countries in Africa who are cultivating GMOs officially. South Africa, Egypt, Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso started planting genetically engineered cotton, but they had spectacular failure in the first harvest, because the cotton they got was short fiber cotton rather than the natural long fiber cotton that the farmers were harvesting before. But this story is not being told. And so the world is being told, oh, Burkina Faso, Nigerian officials have said Burkina Faso is a good example, just northwest of Nigeria. But they won't tell us that it's not such a success. They tried also this kind of cotton. It's called BT cotton in South Africa, to show that small-scale farmers can cultivate it in a place called Makatini Flats. They had some people promoting it, but after a few years, all the farmers had to abandon it, because our small-scale farmers are not monocroppers. They don't just plant one crop. They plant other things. Exactly. And so if you force them to plant only one thing, that means they have to buy everything else.
Yeah.
And they don't have enough profit. They have to buy the seed. If you're using GMOs, genetically engineered seed, you have to buy them every year. It doesn't allow for saving of the seed or sharing of the seed, which is natural way African agriculture performs. Now, who are behind this push to Africa? There are many vested interests. Companies like Syngenta, like Monsanto. I mean, these are very popular names. And then you have recently, unfortunately, international agency, IITA, International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, which is headquarters in Ibadan, is also promoting this, although they produce a lot of hybrid seeds and crops that can tackle the same issues for which they're now pushing pushing GMOs. The United States Agency for International Development, you said, it's also promoting, trying to open up the whole of the continent for invasion of GMOs. Now, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have just announced they're going to help Nigeria build a biotechnology laboratory. And the whole idea is to prime the country to produce these genetically engineered seeds, not just for Nigeria, but the whole of Africa. So this is a big challenge. Now, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have teamed up with Rockefeller Foundation to form what is known as AGRA, the Alliance for a New Grain Revolution in Africa. And you know, if you look at their website, on surface value, they're promoting very good things. They are going to help small-scale farmers increase the food chain, the value addition, help them to the markets. But in the background, and they cannot deny this, is eventually to introduce genetically engineered crops. And we should be very wary of this. It's not today that the push to open up the continent has started. There's been a big contention between the United States and Europe, European Union, for example, because European Union is very resistant and very strict in controlling and monitoring and regulating genetically engineered crops. So when you see the pressure on Europe, you can see why the G8, group of G8, that's what it's called, recently launched what they call the Nutritional Alliance, you know, for, again, aimed at Africa, for Africans who are malnourished. And many governments in Africa, including Nigeria, quickly jumped on the bandwagon because the officials have vested interest in this thing that has dubious value for people.
Wow. The other interesting part of it is to look at it from the point of energy.
Yes.
Yes, because is this also going to be part of, you know, the biofuel industry? Are we going to see, you know, not only buying and eating corn, but actually some of these crops and finding themselves into our gas tanks very soon?
Yeah, you ask a very interesting question because this is also one of the ways in which they try to make genetically engineered crops acceptable. Because if you are told that this crop would only be used to produce energy for machines, then why should you complain about it? Because you are not going to eat it. But the problem is if they are targeting our food crops. I know groups like the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has started, who drafted the Nigerian biofuel policy that has not been debated in the public at all, and it's very badly written, allows for use of food crops to produce biofuel. And they've, I would say, grabbed a lot of land in Nigeria.
Wow.
They bought vast amounts of areas of land to cultivate cassava for use for production of ethanol. And now when you target a crop like cassava, which is a major staple in Africa, in Nigeria, I eat cassava products every day. And so I'm really getting very worried that this is being tampered with. It means they're going to fundamentally affect my right to eat safe food.
Yes.
Once people accept that these crops are okay for machines, then they're also going to enter the food chain. They won't end up in the tank. If they're genetically engineered, they will affect what we eat. We've seen before crops that were planted for animal feed, like Starlink. It was found in food aid in Latin America many years ago. And food aid is another arena through which GMOs are pushed into Africa. In the year 2002, there was a big push. There was food shortage in Zambia. And the whole world, the World Food Program, was going to send to Zambia genetically engineered maize. And the Zambians said, before you send it to us, mill it. We don't want the whole grain, because whole grain will be planted by somebody. We don't want GMOs in our territory. And that became a big political argument. And Zambians were being abused. They were told, how can you be allowing people to die of hunger? You are selecting what to eat. How can a hungry person select what to eat? And Zambia refused. Eventually, what we found out was that Zambia was food sufficient in some other regions, and they could easily have moved the food from that region to where they were food if they were given the finance. And in fact, the amount of money used to transport food aid from US, for example, to Africa, transportation costs is more than enough to buy the food within the region.
Wow. Well, so let's go to the economics of it. You know, small-scale farmers, you know, the African style of agriculture, sustained farming, and all those farming strategies that helps to replenish the environment, those ones gone as well. You know, what happens? What happens to a farmer in my village, for example, who, like you said, would like to grow their tomato, you know, grow their cassava in the same farmland, and also move to the lake next door and fish? What happens to them under the GMO regime?
You are touching on the nerve of the problems of this sector. And, you know, when African officials and generally policymakers around the world speak, they like to tell us that small-scale farmers are inefficient, they can't feed the world, that only industrial commercial farming can feed the world. You know, they conveniently refuse to accept the reality that right now, most of the world is being fed by small-scale farmers. In Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, even in the global north, industrial north, there are a lot of farming in the urban areas and in rural areas. And these are the real people feeding the world. Now, there was a multidisciplinary body set up by the World Bank and some governments some years back, I think in 2006 or thereabout. They produced a report in 2008. It's called the International Assessment of Agriculture and Technology for Development, ISTAD, IAASTD. They produced a report that was endorsed by about 68 countries, and some refused to endorse it, saying that the future of food supply in the world will lie in small-scale farmers, not in industrial commercial farming. As governments just ignore that report. Wow. This was a report produced not by radical NGOs campaigning against genetically engineered crops. It was produced by scientists, by development agencies, and it was set up by a conservative body like the World Bank and the United Nations. And so that report tells the truth about the future. And commercial industrial farming has had its day, its stride. The first green revolution brought a lot of food. But what was the outcome eventually? If you go to India, Asia, and check out, they're telling you that they're having declining yields. They lost a lot of species of rice. Yeah. Because now when you're having this kind of industrial farming, and this is a challenge with GMOs, they clearly erode the biodiversity. If you had 1,000 varieties of cassava, for example, or rice, you're going to end up with 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Because the strain is very strong, and through cross-pollination and some other kind of mixed cropping, they get to affect others. And so we have a real challenge because this kind of agricultural production relies, as I said, on monocropping, because we have to, many of the crops are genetically engineered to resist, to withstand chemicals like herbicides. So if you plant corn on this for only corn, you can bring the herbicide and spray over the whole farm, then everything else would die except that corn. So the advantage is that the farmer doesn't need to weed, like our farmers are always weeding all the time. So the farmer can now plant and then spray the chemical, and there goes all the weeds. But the problem has been seen in the US and Canada is that the weeds, and nature is not foolish.
Exactly.
You now have super weeds that resist the chemicals.
Oh,
so every year you have to have more powerful chemicals, and this does not only affect the weeds, it affects everything else. Yes. It affects everything else. Because when you have only one crop standing and the weeds and other nutrients gone, then it affects the entire biodiversity. There are some crops also genetically engineered to act as pesticides themselves. So that when certain pests eat those crops, try to eat the crop, they die off. So the crop is saved from being affected by the pest. But the problem is that sometimes these crops also affect non-target pests.
Yes, of course.
And some of the pests also resist, so you have super pests, super bugs.
Wow.
And so you're having a situation where genetically engineering is not just affecting the method of cropping, of farming, it's affecting biodiversity, poisoning the water bodies, as you mentioned.
Yes.
You can go to the lake and things are gone. And it's really something that our governments ought to be seriously concerned about. Our governments in Africa are so keen. Whenever they say anything called foreign direct investment, they open up for they don't care what is coming. Some people tell them people are hungry. They say, okay, yes, we are hungry. They tell you there's no food. They say, oh, yes, there's no food. Now, we used to be told that, and sometimes they tell us that Africa is overpopulated. If Africa is overpopulated, that should mean that we don't have enough land. How come our lands are being grabbed?
Exactly.
Up to the, I mean, so many lands have been taken by foreigners, either from the Gulf states or by investors and speculators from Europe and North America.
Well, you know, viewers, this talking to architect Nemo Bassey again, and you're hearing it live from him that very soon your cassava might soon be growing beard. That's what GMOs mean, in a nutshell. But let's go to...
You may not actually identify them by looking at them physically. That's the danger.
Oh, no, absolutely.
If we could look at them and say, okay, this fruit, Nigerians, when they say big mango or big orange, they say this GMO is not true, not necessarily true. They will look the same as the other one. So you cannot really distinguish them.
Yes.
It's only the impact that makes the difference.
Wow. So, Home of Mother Earth Foundation, what is it going to be doing for us? This is your new baby, as you say. Yes.
Yes.
And this is to talk about the environmental and ecological think tank in Nigeria, apparently. You know, maybe even the rest of Africa.
Nigeria is the base, but Africa is our focus.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what should we expect from this foundation?
We think that after being the human rights and environmental justice movement for over 20 years in Nigeria and having experience of working around the world, I have come to the conclusion that one of the big challenges for us is that our perception is frozen in lines driven by the neoliberal or whatever is the most popular logic in the world. So we need to fundamentally re-examine all the issues that affect our environment. What are the political background to these issues? Who is pushing it for what reason? What is the best interest of the Nigerian people, Nigerian environment? So we're not going to be looking just at environment as environment. We'll look at the social context, the economic context, the political context. That's why it's an ecological think tank. We want to redefine things. And we want to do this by, we're looking at two broad areas. Fossil fuels, which of course, you know, is been my passion for so many years, and that includes climate change, includes the false solution for climate change, which includes things like like land grabs. And then we're looking also at hunger politics. Why are people hungry? Not just what should people eat. Why we need to look at the political cause of hunger. Hunger is a political thing.
Absolutely.
It's also a commercial thing. People manufacture hunger. You can almost buy hunger from the market shelf. So we need to look at this. And what the major public phase of our organization, the Health of Mother Earth Foundation, is what we call the Sustainability Academy or homeschool. And so right now we're planning twice a year. We invite somebody who has deep knowledge in one aspect of what we're focusing on, and we call them instigators, not facilitators or educators. We want to instigate positive change. We want to get people to think in the right direction. So we'll get them to speak to policymakers, speak to academic scholars and undergraduates, speak to high school students, speak to community people on the same topic. We started in August, and we're going to have Ambassador Pablo Solon, the former ambassador of Bolivia to the United Nations.
Wow.
He's a man who stood up against the whole world when it came to debate and negotiation on climate change, standing for the truth and standing for what is right, not just people speculating about carbon and making money from carbon trading. And so now he is the leader of Focus on Global South based in Thailand, Bangkok. So he's coming to Nigeria for 1 week. We'll speak to policymakers in Abuja. And we'll take him to Lagos, University of Lagos. We're speaking to scholars and undergraduates. Then we come to Benin City to speak to secondary school students as well as community people, looking at climate change and the looming food crisis. That's the topic is going to be looking at. In November, we'll be getting Firoz Manzi, formerly of Pambazuka. He's coming to Nigeria again to speak to this kind of strata of the society on unpacking the awakenings, the uprisings in Africa. We hear about the uprising in North Africa, but the uprisings all over across the continent. So we need to pick out all these strands and say, what are the implications for our environment? About this uprising in Egypt, in Tunisia, the January uprising in 2012 in Nigeria. We need to look at all this holistically, and he's done some thinking in that direction. Then from next year, we'll be having one of these homeschools in Nigeria, another one in another African country. So we'll begin to move to other countries.
Let's ask a quick question about non-governmental organizations. Don't we have too many of them in Africa, to the extent that, you know, some of these policies we are debating here, discussing here, are actually promoted by non-governmental organizations to the detriment of the people? And, you know, how do Africans, you know, draw the line between non-governmental organizations that are doing good for them and the ones that are not? Because as you have traced this all the way back, it looks like, you know, they have become an appendage of so many of these controversial policies in Africa. They're the ones who push for it, support it without sometimes even knowing, or sometimes they are driven by funding to do what. So this is a contentious issue that I think you can help us address quickly.
Obviously you are right. There are many non-governmental organizations. Of course, they are set up for different purposes. There are some that are set up by industry. For example, all companies set up non-governmental organizations to propagate their own views and to defend them. The same with the biotech, the genetic engineering sector. They have a lot of NGOs. In fact, in Nigeria and some other African countries, there are some groupings who are well-funded, who are training journalists to report from the pro-genetic engineering perspective. A group like they call them BF for Africa, BF4A, that's the acronym. They train journalists in Africa, in Nigeria, in Uganda, and in Ghana, and some other places. And whenever they see article, for example, presenting the evils of the biotech sector, they quickly inject items that would counter that. So there are NGOs. There are some NGOs, of course, where it's a broad spectrum. It's a free world. It's just for, unfortunately, people may not know quickly which organization stands for. So I would just advise that when the public is engaging with any organization, they have to look at what are the objectives, what are the things they're promoting, what's their track record. If you look at organizations like the Environmental Rights Action that I've led for 20 years, you can trace us back to what we've been talking about, what we've been doing, then you can see a consistency.
Yes.
So when you have if you have an NGO that flip-flops from one position to the other, then of course you have to know that this may be dancing to the tunes of funders. And of course there are some funders would like to say, I'm just coming from a meeting with some funders, and they will tell you, well, we don't tell non-governmental organizations what to do, but many funders do that.
Yes.
They drive the policy. And so when funders are ready to fund HIV/AIDS, so many NGOs jump into that because the money is there. Yeah. When they want to fund, something, distribution of condoms or something like that, female and male condoms, of course, a lot of people say, well, we can do this. Yeah. So some NGOs are set up as a market to market whatever is popular.
Wow.
But there are NGOs that are concerned with things about life, about justice, about political liberation of our continent, about challenging the system, and knowing that without challenging the system, overturning the system, we cannot really say that we are liberated as Africans or as peoples around the world.
Yes. So one, I'm going to be wrapping up now, is to talk a little bit about your work as a religious person. You know, most people don't know you to be an evangelist. And it's always been that people who are activists in nature are also almost seen as either not believing in God completely or not deciding whether there's God or not.
Yes.
In your own case, you are a very committed religious person. You are a Christian, and
yes.
actually
I'm a pastor.
Yes. in a church. You know, how does that work? Especially when you come from a country like Nigeria, where pastors are also like NGOs representing what is, we can almost say, evil in the religious world. You know, like pastors, flying jets, and you've been a pastor for a long time as well. Do you have a jet?
Come on, don't talk about jet. If I had a jet, I would take you out for lunch.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know you are joking about that.
Yeah,
now, my role as a religious person, as a deeply religious person, as a Christian, as a leader in that direction. Actually, my local assembly, I'm in charge of the humanitarian work. And you could say I'm a pastor to the lepers, to the downtrodden.
Wow.
So it's very social. We are very social about it. We take care of people who are sick. We visit the ex-lepers that society refused to take care of and who are now in camps. We train them, we give their children scholarships. These are people who would never say, they can only say thank you. They can't give you anything back.
That's
they
right.
can't come to your church to give an offering. They won't give you food to eat. You may not even want to accept food for them. So it's a kind of selfless work that we do. And whenever, from my church assembly, whenever there's global disaster, like when there was tsunami in Japan after the nuclear fallout, we sent help. When Haiti had the earthquake, we sent some funds to help in the relief work. So we do all this, and that is actually my ministry. Yes, but also as a Christian and as a person of faith, I would say, I found out that the environmental justice movement, if you look at the Bible, Christ was a radical. He wasn't a reformer. He was overturning his day was overturning the tables. That means he knew what the bankers can be up to.
Yes.
All these bankers who are ruining the global economy. So he wouldn't have stood for it at all. He wouldn't bail out Wall Street if he was around.
That's right.
He would have overturned their tables and kicked them out.
Yes.
And so I have understand that perspective. And we find that the religious books, the Christian Bible, the Quran, none of them supports injustice. They're all they're fighting for freedom, for liberty, for the poor, for the orphans, for the downtrodden. And there are so many provisions in the Bible that if really adhered to, we have a different world, a world of justice and peace. Because even the Bible says, when people fast and pray and do, he said, is that the fast I'm looking for? That's what the Bible says in the book of Isaiah chapter 58. See, this is not the fast I'm looking for. I'm looking for a situation where the downtrodden, the people who are facing injustice are set free. Where you pay your workers, you don't owe them salaries. All those kind of things that are right there. And in fact, in terms of the critical issue of today, climate change, the Bible has a lot to say also that we can learn and that we can use to fight for justice and to try to save our planet.
Wow.
Sometimes people think that when the Bible says man should subdue the earth, that gave the industrial world the right to pollute, to destroy, and transform nature. It doesn't. It was just a question of stewardship. You handle this thing. Replenish it means don't destroy it. Yeah. And now we're extracting. The world now knows that. I mean, the World Bank issued a report late last year. The International Energy Agency issued a report also saying that unless 80% of the known oil reserves, fossil fuel reserves, are left untapped, we're going to have global warming to a level that will become unacceptable, that will make life difficult on the planet.
Yes.
But, what is happening?
We are there.
Look at the fracking in the United States. Rather than say, okay, let's stop the known reserves, they're telling you we can get oil from anywhere, from rock, can get oil from the deepest oceans, and even when these things are not safe, they are going ahead. This is complete responsibility.
Yes. So finally, do you think there can be a replay of January uprising in Nigeria to the extent that Egypt has had 2 revolutions almost now within 2 years? Well, we only had just a little bit of uprising, and it seems to have petered out and died out. Do you think the movement can come back again that brought about Occupy Nigeria?
I think so. I think very much so. I very much believe that can happen within a twinkle of an eye. Nigerian people are very sensitized. They're just being pushed to the wall. They're obeying, they're moving, they're absorbing the pains, but it just needs a trigger. And that can happen at any time. I think the young people have done very well in terms of using social media. Organizations like, your organization, Sahara Reporters, the report that we keep receiving every day from here, even before the media in Nigeria carries them. If you look at the chat rooms and on Facebook, on Twitter, and so on, everybody is just so sensitive and so ready. It would be a big mistake for people in power to think that, well, this is just people who have access to technology. There are more cell phones in Nigeria than you can think of in most other countries on the continent.
More than you have in about 4 European countries.
And Nigerians are very, very good at using this technology. Things that maybe even the manufacturers don't know the phones can do, they are doing it.
That's right.
So the uprising in Nigeria can happen at any time. And it will be in the best interest of politicians to learn to do the right thing and stop pushing people to the wall.
Wow. Well, Nimo Bassey, once again, thank you so much for coming to our studios in New York City, and we hope you come back again soon.
Well, my pleasure to be in Sahara studio anytime, any day.
Thank you, sir.
All right.